Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now then, you're welcome back. So before we talk Patrick Reed, another goal to tell you about at Old Trafford. It's gone from bad to worse for Manchester United, Nathan.
3-0 to Manchester City, 40 minutes gone, and this was a absolute calamity. It'll go down as an own goal to Andreas Pereira. It was a sort of cross-come shot from inside the area, left-hand side. Kevin De Bruyne drilled it across, saved by David De Gea, but as he saved it, Pereira was chasing back, and it comes off his knee, goes straight into the back of the head. It was a quick-fire counter-attack, but United were just all over the place. They pushed a few men forward. They're obviously trying to chase it early, and this could be a proper whooping at this stage. At just the wrong time for...
Moments later, City cut them completely open again, and it was a point-blank save from De Gea, and it could be anything now because City are starting to enjoy this.
And this is City without a striker on the pitch. They've left Gabriel Jesus and Sergio Aguero on the bench for this match. So just the movement again, like Bernardo Silva, earlier in the season probably looked like he might be a contender for player of the season. He's been back to that form tonight. He's just absolutely running the show in the middle of the pitch, and like Sterling, Mahrez, every time they get near it, they're just at a totally different level to United. And same failings, no midfield, defence all over the shop. City coming again. United, 4 or 5 players desperately chasing back, and again another chance missed. Raheem Sterling, full stretch, 6 yards out, just can't get enough of his left foot on it. Flies a shot to the left and wide.
Interesting team talk for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They're going to have to change this. They might just actually have to try and say, can we keep this to 3-0, which would be a grim thought, but that's where they are at Old Trafford.
Well, was it last year's semi-final that Manchester City, they scored 9 or 10 against Burton?
Oh yeah. Let's turn from that to Patrick Reed. So we have Shane Ryan with us, who's a regular guest on Golf Weekly. He's author of the New York Times bestseller, Slaying the Tiger. You're there, Shane. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, guys? I'm here.
Good. Great to have you with us. So we wanted to talk to you about Patrick Reed, Masters champion, player you've profiled, not least in your book, and done some digging on his college days. And all of that kind of came up around the time he won the Masters as well. I think it came to wider public attention that Reed has had a difficult past and is probably an unusual person in some respects and not the most popular man on tour, and that was talked about at length in his family situation when he won the Masters. Since then, it's probably died down a touch. I mean, Reed hasn't been tearing things up massively in his career. He hasn't won massive tournaments, and he stayed out of trouble until the end of last year, the cheating incident. Although, just for people who aren't too familiar with all this, he says there was no intent. Effectively, and people might have seen, even on Twitter, the slow-motion replays, he moved sand twice in a sanded area. I don't think it was strictly a bunker, but he improved his lie, effectively, would be the crime, and he did it twice, and it was very, very blatant. I mean, you could see the sand being moved. He said there was no intent. That was probably his first mistake in his handling of this latest episode.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a lot of people knowing his history and just seeing the strangeness of the way he put the club directly behind the ball before sweeping backward. You mentioned it's a waste area, so you can ground your club, so that wasn't illegal, but you certainly can't move sand that's kind of inconveniently in front of your ball. So yeah, it seemed like there was intent. If you're asking what I believe, I definitely think he cheated on purpose. Not everybody agrees with that, but that's my belief. So anyway, yeah, I think the big thing that you pointed out is there was absolutely no accountability from him or from anyone else. And what was really interesting was the President's Cup happened just the next week. And so it was a really weird timing situation where his teammates in the President's Cup all of a sudden had to broadcast this solidarity with him or choose to call him out. But they all kind of towed the line and were on message. So it was a weird situation where even his fellow players on the American side, there was no accountability from them. Nobody in power was saying exactly what this was. And I think that was really frustrating for people, for fans. And we saw the way the Australian fans blew up at him and were heckling him pretty mercilessly all 4 days that he was playing President's Cup. And then at the Sony tournament that just ended, he made the playoff and was against Justin Thomas. And after a very important putt, somebody in the crowd there screamed cheater at him. And they picked it up on TV. It was very, very blatant and obvious. And a lot of people have been making the comment that that's supposed to be one of the most laid-back galleries of the year in Hawaii. So, if they're giving him stick, it's, what's going to happen in New York for the U.S. Open and, what's going to happen the rest of the year. And, he would have gotten it no matter what, the heckling. But I think, the lack of accountability makes people kind of double down.
I mean, the President's Cup, obviously it's a team event and it's adversarial by nature, so it was almost expected that he would get some abuse from the crowd, and that's kind of fine, because that is the nature of the atmosphere at that event. And it was at that Reed, when he was getting a huge amount of stick at one green, he started to pretend to dig sand. And interestingly, actually, the PGA Tour, of all people, retweeted this as if they thought this was brilliant and hilarious, and, I guess got to get those clicks, so they were all over that. But I must say, I thought the year would be parked and he would come out, and especially in Hawaii, of all places, I just thought this kind of thing would drift away into the forgotten past. We live in a very instant society now, and how many news cycles is it since Patrick Reed cheated? I just thought it would sort of be forgotten. So for it to happen at that moment, I mean, we're talking about a sport where there's complete silence at a moment where he's making this crucial putt. There's how many people around a green? It's a very small area. And actually, I'll play the audio. People can sort of hear it. But I was just surprised that it's taken this turn for Reed, and that you do wonder what the season holds for him now. Here's the moment where, again, this isn't a playoff hole. This is a big moment. Everybody's been ultra quiet, and then the cheater call comes out.
Someone yelled as loud and as clear as day, cheater, as that ball was racing toward the hole.
So that was the moment. And it's funny, a colleague of ours who doesn't like golf, we were chatting about this at the top of the show, and he was saying, well, what's the big deal? People get abused like this all the time in pretty much every sport. But in golf, the silence when players are taking a shot is paramount. And if Patrick Reed is going to spend a season or two, or even a few months, waiting for that silence to be broken with a scream of cheater, which is audible to absolutely everybody, this will become a serious enough situation for him.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the way tension can escalate. There's this talking point that a lot of people like to regurgitate that, Patrick Reed loves adversity, and he thrives when people are hating him. But even just 4 days in Australia, by the end of the third day, it had gotten so bad that his caddy jumped out of a cart and confronted a fan, and there was going to be an altercation. Originally, people were reporting that he punched him. His story was that he shoved him. Who knows exactly what happened? But yeah, it just shows you this thing is not easy to handle for anybody, even if you think you're somebody who loves adversity or whatever. So yeah, if he has to deal with this, as I think he will, for a period of months and maybe even this entire year, maybe beyond, that's going to take its toll. Absolutely. It's not going to be fun. You would think a normal human being would start to dread being out on the course and in front of these galleries, just because it's either you're taking abuse or, even worse, you're waiting to take abuse.
Shane, in your book, Slaying the Tiger, when you spent that year on the PGA Tour and going to event after event and getting to know the players and maybe the way the players interact with each other, the players' response to this, and maybe the fact it was the President's Cup the week after, diffused it somewhat, that they either had to back him or speak out, and it seems they backed him. Justin Thomas made one or two jokes. I think at one stage he was in a bunker in a practice round and asked Patrick Reed what he thought he should do as he was sort of clearing the bunker out to give himself a nicer lie. It was all quite jovial and a bit of a laugh. But your sense, having been on tour in those Tuesday, Wednesday practice rounds when players are talking and bitching away, are they looking at Patrick Reed and ostracising him completely, or is this, look, these things happen, we're the PGA Tour, we all stick together, we all just keep our heads down?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you can ostracize him further. I think he was already kind of an unpopular figure, and he isolates himself to some degree. He's not exactly going out and seeking friendship or camaraderie or even a practice round with his colleagues. But yeah, I think, look, we saw from the international team, Cam Smith basically called him a cheater. We've seen some older golfers like Chris DeMarco kind of sound off on Twitter. You're just starting to see the front of the wave in a lot of ways. If it hadn't been the President's Cup, I think you would have seen more. I think as time goes on, you're going to learn more about what their real reactions were. And there's no way they like this. I mean, golf is a sport where, not cheating is a critical part of it because so much time is spent on your own. And the integrity of the game is enforced somewhat by the players themselves, which makes it unique among professional sports in that regard. And so, yeah, it's a big deal that he cheated, and people aren't going to respect it. if you cheat to shave off a stroke, you're stealing money from the people you're playing against. This is a zero-sum game out there. So I don't think they liked Reed to begin with. I think they're going to like him even less now. So, yeah, he's not going to be anybody's best friend, and you'll start to see more and more criticism, I think, come out from players.
Without wanting to defend Patrick Reed, because I think most people feel that he did cheat here and he should have been punished properly, and like we've spoken about this on Golf Weekly, that if he was playing on the European Tour, there's a definite sense that he would have received a pretty stern warning at the very least, that it would have been made public. But from his point of view, he's not the only player who's cheated. He's the one who had the slow-mo camera on him inside the bunker. There must be countless other cases where players get away with it. You even think back to the different attitudes of somebody like Phil Mickelson at the 2018 US Open, where he hits a moving ball and sort of laughs about it, and this is all part of his unique, zany personality, that it's very easy to pile on Patrick Reed and everybody's just looking for any excuse to do it.
Well, I think first thing I would say is that he has a history of it. And they came out with a video immediately from 2015 that showed him doing the same thing at the Hero. So there's that. It's someone who, in people's minds, is a repeat offender. The Mickelson thing, I don't really hold that as a good comparison, because he was clearly doing something that was a form of protest against the greens at the USTA. He wasn't trying to get one over on anybody. He was essentially saying, penalize me. I'm making a point here and I'm frustrated. I don't like the move, but I do distinguish it from what Reed did. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, you can take the argument that, hey, other people have cheated in the past, so it's okay. And I know that's not what you're saying, but to me, that's not convincing. I mean, I don't think there are that many examples of cheating. Every year we have examples of people calling penalties on themselves that nobody else saw, sometimes after the fact, sometimes in a way that costs them a great deal. So, yeah, I think, Patrick Reed, he's got to be accountable for this. And he wasn't, either by himself or the governing bodies or his fellow players to a large extent. Nobody called him out. And that's fine, but it's going to infuriate fans and other golfers more. And it's just going to make matters worse for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, because, as you said, it's a self-policing sport, and so when the word being shouted out is cheater, it takes on an extra resonance. This isn't Matt Kuchar stiffing his caddy, which would be an embarrassing thing to follow Matt Kuchar around, but it wouldn't taint his involvement in the sport to begin with, which is what is hanging over Patrick Reed now. Has golf ever had a bad boy to the extent of Reed, as in somebody who turned up tournament after tournament, was abused over something as serious as cheating, and just kind of took on that persona, which is what Reed is facing here across this year?
No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody's really come close. Look, Patrick Reed has had a really complicated past. I don't think I've ever seen a reaction to somebody winning a big tournament like the Masters, like we saw his reaction. The immediate story in the aftermath became about his parents and his past, and hey, why don't people like Patrick Reed at a time when, by all rights, he should be being celebrated as somebody who just, earned himself some golf immortality. No, I just don't think there's an analog, period. I can't even begin to think of anybody who would come close. I think already, he's not yet 30, and he's already kind of set the mark for golf villains.
You can give people a sense of his personality, because you talked about him at length in your book, Slaying the Tiger, and you got a sense of him. Because I'm looking at him now and I'm wondering, has this got serious enough, or will this get serious enough, where he needs to redeem his reputation? Even if cynically behind it all he doesn't give a damn and thinks this is all nonsense, but that the effect of this will just become too much, and he'll have to sit down and do an interview with the Golf Channel somewhere and put on a sad face and talk about, his struggles and how he wants to do better and he's sorry. Has he, in so much as Reed and his personality, do you think that's likely, or will this guy just tough this out and say screw everyone?
Yeah, that's one of the central conflicts, I think, of Patrick Reed's psychology and his personality, and that of his team, is that they refuse to give an inch at any point, even when they're clearly in the wrong. And sometimes when it doesn't seem like they're in the wrong. For example, his parents have gone around and courted media appearances and showed up, and he's abandoned. His parents and he have been separated for a number of years for reasons that nobody's sure about, but he has never really made a public statement about why that happened, about why he left, and he's let them completely seize control of the story, which is, to me, a very weird thing for parents to do. But point being, he just doesn't give in to this popular perception, which I think is a true perception, that, by showing a little humanity publicly, even if you said, as you said, even if it's like cynical, do it. Or just in a very basic way, after you get caught red-handed, admit what you did. And I just think the constant stubbornness, the constant refusal to engage in any way with the media or with fans, again, isolates him, hides his true personality, whatever that personality may be, from people, and makes it easier and easier for people to just cast him as this enemy. And look, everything he does just kind of adds to this public story that he has no part of. He has no control over it.
If there's one good thing to come out of this, maybe it's that the PGA Tour are a little bit embarrassed about everything that's happening, because we talk about it being a self-policing sport. There's also rules, and he cheated, clearly live on television, and the PGA Tour decided not to do anything. Now, was it because it was a week away from a President's Cup where he's going to be wearing the colours, he's going to be representing the PGA Tour, and they didn't want this scandal about a player probably having to be stripped of his place in the team? And as you say, hoping that this would all blow over the space of a couple of weeks. Whereas this now, you feel, is going to be a talking point. I don't know if he'll play in Phoenix this year, but anybody who knows the Phoenix Open, where they have 100,000 people at the 16th hole, and it's pretty rough and rowdy at the best of times, if Patrick Reed goes there, God help him. It's going to be a big story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the PGA Tour's behaviour, I don't know who retweeted or put up the clip of Reed pretending to dig sand in Australia, but to say that was ill-judged for the PGA Tour, of all people, to be doing that is an understatement. So, they've come out of this, they've had leniency on a lot of issues with various players, often hand-picked players down the years. But, I mean, for them to be involving themselves in the defence of Patrick Reed was just bizarre. I couldn't understand what they were thinking.
Yeah, it was really strange. But I think it's part institutional. I think when you commit yourself to a PR tactic that all your players are gentlemen and scholars, and there's so much dignity and integrity, I think really when something comes out that violates that, your hands are almost tied, and not only do you not know how to respond, but you don't have the mechanisms to respond. And the PGA Tour, in a lot of ways, is an unbelievably impressive organization. They run things very efficiently. They're head and shoulders above other governing bodies in golf, and it puts me in an awkward position almost to criticize them, because there are a ton of people who work for the PGA Tour who help me out routinely on anytime I'm there, and have been integral to the work I do. But yeah, again, you do have to criticize when it's necessary, and I don't know that they exactly know how to handle it when something like this happens. They have no board that could decide to suspend for something like this, and really all they can do is a 2-shot penalty, and it just feels woefully inadequate. And you had Slugger White, the rules official, when they asked about Patrick Reed, said, I think the quote was, "Oh, he was unbelievable," when he assessed him the penalty, and he said that in a positive way, like he was complimenting them on how he took it. And it's just this absurd situation that you go, what twilight zone are we living in? I mean, it's alienating in a way for people to see this and go, are they not seeing what I'm seeing? I mean, it's just a little strange that way. So, yeah, I think they could improve in that regard for sure.
It is worth remembering that this comment on Sunday night came in a playoff.
It's a big moment, yeah.
But that under all this cloud, he's still performing. All right, it's a reduced field at the Tournament of Champions. There's only 30 or so players.
Yeah.
But it's still a quality field. He's going up against Justin Thomas.
Yeah.
And he's there in a playoff performing, which would suggest that maybe he is just wired differently than the rest of us. And whereas you feel that this pressure building throughout the year is going to have some sort of a negative effect, that maybe there's something in him that he can use this as it's me against the world.
So then, to sum up, what we could be on the precipice of, Shane, as we kind of round off this conversation, and this is the interesting thing for the sport, if you have a guy who's unusual enough in that he won't do the soft interview on Golf Channel to say, I'm so sorry, and to win back the affections of everybody, who actually, as Nathan said, can still perform to a really high level even in that atmosphere, and you have, as you do at most PGA Tour events, lots of drunken fans who, the more drink they have, probably quite like the idea of a bad boy. We have, maybe for the first time in golf, like a proper guy on tour who's going to take lots of abuse and be pilloried everywhere he goes, and it's going to introduce this new dimension.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting question to see. My take, as I said before, I think it's inevitable that this breaks him down in some way, and I don't think it's a positive. Australia, he lost his first 3 matches before he went and won his singles match, and I thought that plus Paris, I think it was indicative that this isn't always a good thing. We have this thing, Michael Jordan in America was a guy who famously loved adversity, and he famously responded well to it. There have been other people, someone like Derek Jeter, who have comments like, "I love when an entire stadium is booing me; it fires me up." And I think we romanticize this narrative of the killer athlete who loves to, like you said, wired differently and loves to perform when everybody's against him. But this is a very different animal from being roundly booed because you're on a different team. This is very personal. Golf is an individual sport, and you're talking about one guy walking in a gallery full of thousands of people taking abuse. Very strange situation, a very different situation. I feel that even someone like Patrick Reed, who's obviously an incredible talent and a tough guy, really good under pressure and very resilient, even him, I think it's going to break him down.
Okay, well, we'll see. Listen, a pleasure to have you on as always, Shane. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, guys.
Cheers. That's Shane Ryan there, author of the New York Times bestseller, Slaying the Tiger. Back in 1 sec.
Join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter.
Quality, performance